Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be a little bit similar to last week. I'm staying on the theme of books that I read in school, although this one was a book that was read to me and I was a lot younger. So before we get into that though, I wanted to say if you have subscribed to my channel at any point in the history of my channel, thank you so much for being here. I love that you're here. If you haven't subscribed, that's totally fine, but it's so easy to do. You just have to click the button that says subscribe, totally free. You'll get notified when I upload new videos. There's literally no downside to subscribing, so please subscribe. And if you end up enjoying this video, please like, comment, and share. I always want to hear from you guys, so please comment below. And if you enjoy this video, please share it, because the only way people are going to find my channel is usually through word of mouth. So please share this video if you enjoy it. That being said, I'm still in the process of moving, of getting things handled, so it kind of works out for me continuing this theme of books that I read or had read to me in my childhood, especially in school. Because I don't actually have those books, and I'm just gonna put them up here next to me and we'll talk about them. So this theme kind of works for this time in my life as I pack up all of my belongings, including my books. So the book we're going to be talking about today is one that I actually had read to me in class. So it wasn't just me, it was me and my classmates in third grade. So a long time ago. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and that was still around the time when my teachers were reading books to us instead of us reading along with them. Don't get me wrong, we did have some books in that class that year that we read like with the teacher, but she also still did times where it was like, here's the book, we're going to sit down, it's reading time, and I'm going to read to you. And I love being read to. I loved story time as a kid. It was something that I always looked forward to. So the book that we're going to be talking about today is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. And this is quite the old book. This is actually the original cover that they have at the Library of Congress. It's like the easiest one you could find on the internet and download for free. It's in like the public domain now, so you can just get it anywhere. But this is the like original cover that you can find, and you can tell it looks very old, and it is an old book actually. I as a kid obviously had no idea how old the book was. It was just, here's story time, let's read this book. And it's a fantasy adventure book that's so good. Such a good children's book, but just such a book, like such a good book, like in general. Like I honestly could sit down and read this again at my age and genuinely have a good time. So it's actually, when I say it's old, it's really old. It was published in the year 1900. So literally this book is 126 years old. That's a very old book. You can tell just by the way it looks. So it's kind of incredible how so many books, so many things, just art, literature, that have impacted the whole world generation after generation, that stick around this whole time. It's not just the book that we all still know. There's been so many movies that were just adaptations of this book, but then there were so many other types of media that were created based on the story that this book had and created. And it's so cool to see a story that started out so long ago and just how ingrained it has stayed in our culture since then. So getting into a little bit more about the book, there is a summary here. I'm just going to pick out some sentences to read that kind of feel more relevant to the book that we're talking about, because it's a little bit about his life and like the author's life and other books that he wrote, but I'm going to read just some specific sentences. So, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was published in 1900, and the author, L. Frank Baum, 1856 to 1919, was a financially struggling businessman and the father of 4 children living in Chicago. He began his career as an author after his mother-in-law reportedly encouraged him to write down the nursery rhymes he had told his sons over the years. So then it goes on to talk about the other books that he published. So Baum published Mother Goose in prose in 1897, and then Father Goose, his book, in 1899, in cooperation with Chicago artist William Wallace Denslow, who probably illustrated the book. The first edition of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which is what's pictured here, was also illustrated by Denslow. And the really cool thing is that this is not the only book of The Wizard of Oz. There's actually a total of 14 books in the Oz series, beginning with The Marvelous Land of Oz and ending with Glinda of Oz, which was published posthumously in 1920. So that's a little bit about the book. Talking about the plot, because I don't have obviously the blurb, in case anyone watching this hasn't ever heard of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the movie, the book, anything. Just to describe the plot a little bit, because we don't have a blurb to go from. The Wizard of Oz, like the book, like The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, introduces a lot of fictional characters, so like fantasy characters, and the plot kind of follows a young girl. Her name is Dorothy. She is, I think in the book, because in the movie versions, she's a little bit older, but I think in the book, she's pretty young, like probably between the age of like 9 and 12, I'm gonna guess. And she gets whisked away. She hides in her house with her dog during a tornado in her home state of Kansas, and gets her house gets whisked away in a tornado, and she lands in the fantastical, mystical land of Oz, and she, on an adventure to figure out how to get home, trying to find the Wizard of Oz, who is the only one who allegedly can send her home, meets a lot of these fantastical, very unique characters in the land of Oz. And so yeah, it's an adventure book. Lessons that are learned along the way, friendships that are made, dangers to learn about. So it really is a great children's story, but also just a really great written plot. Getting into the cover a little bit, obviously this is an insanely old cover. It's obviously a little bit different than how covers to books look nowadays, right? So you have the title at the very top, and there is like an image on the bottom. It's a lion and he's wearing glasses, and if you know the story, or if you don't, this is obviously the Cowardly Lion, one of the many characters Dorothy meets on her journey and adventure in Oz. And I love that there's a little bow in his mane at the top of his head. That's so cute. I don't know if I've ever seen the original cover. Like I said, when this book was read to me when I was in the 3rd grade, I don't remember it looking like this, because this is obviously like a first edition. So the book that I had read to me was a later edition. So the cover looked very different. So I don't think I've ever seen this cover before. It's actually really cool. It's actually pretty simple. And I can't help but wonder if most books, like most book covers, were like this back then, or if this was exclusive to children's books back then, because again, this is a children's book, it's not just a book. So it's kind of hard to tell what the original colors of the book were, because of age and time that has changed the color of the book, because it might have been yellowish, whitish back in the day, but now it's like a gray, like from dirt and dust over the years, because it looks like it's also cloth. It doesn't look like obviously what we see today, like hardcover books that are like they're glossed over, embossed kind of. This is obviously way before we had those capabilities, so it's like cloth cover, so it looks like it's held on to the dust over the years. But the font and then the drawing, it's all kind of in the same colors. It's like red and green, which is like Christmas colors. But it's interesting because I wonder if any of those colors used to be a little different when it was originally published. So yeah, it's a really minimalistic cover, and I think it's cute. It's perfect. It's like it said, like we talked about in the summary kind of description of the author, like based on nursery rhymes that he told his kids So yeah, it's nice when it makes sense that it's something so simplistic because it's based on nursery rhymes. So the cover is very cute and nostalgic. You can say nostalgic because it's old, it just is. And it does make me think of like an older time. So like, not necessarily when it was originally published, but like an older time when I was younger and had books read to me. So scrolling through this PDF, because again, we have the entire book here. It's in the public domain now. There are some other pages, like in the intro, like beginning of the book. Like there's a page specifically that has, it looks like 2 of the author's other books listed here that you can get. It looks like from the publisher. Okay, yeah. So if you like reached out to the publisher company, like the publishing company, you could get these other books that the author also wrote. They're also children's books, the ones that we kind of mentioned in the summary. Father Goose, his book, and the songs of Father Goose, which is crazy. Look at the price, $1.25 and then $1 for a book. Oh my god. Especially a new book. Like, you can get used books these days at some used bookstores for $1, but not new books. I can't remember the last time you could get a new book for $1. As we keep going, there's another page that has the title and the author's name, and it's almost like it's like another cover of the book, but like inside. And it also says with pictures by W.W. Denslow, and obviously that's the person we mentioned earlier, William Wallace Denslow. So he was the illustrator of this book. And this picture, I'm going to put it up here because it's actually really cute, is of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, which it's so funny seeing the original pictures of them because there are so many movie adaptations and actually TV show adaptations based on these characters, and it's just interesting to see how they were originally drawn. The Scarecrow, I feel like, hasn't changed much in terms of people creating that in real life, like making that character for the movies and TV shows. It looks pretty much the same, honestly, if you're looking at it. You know, the baggy clothes, the same pointy hat, like I guess it's because you know, when it comes to scarecrows, those things used to be very popular back in the day because a lot of people had their own farms to grow crops on, and so they had to have something to keep the crows off of their crops, and so most people had scarecrows, and there was like a generalization of what scarecrows looked like. I don't think most people have scarecrows anymore. Most people don't have their own little places to grow food anymore, so scarecrows are not really a thing anymore. Not necessarily that the Tin Man is based on a real thing, but, you know, looking at the Tin Man, he looks a little bit different than so many of the versions that we see in movies and TV shows today. Because, like, look at the way the head is, you know, the chin, like, the jaw of the Tin Man is so very, like, obviously, like, square and, like, it's being held on. And the arms, yeah, it's just interesting. It looks so different to me than the versions we see. There's also an introduction, and I'm not gonna go into it because if you're interested, you can go look it up yourself, but it kind of is from the author of why he wrote this book and why he felt it was such a great thing to be able to share it with not just his children, but the world's children. And there's a little drawn picture of Toto the dog. Of course, as I always do, I am going to read the first page. So in this book, I'm going to put it right here. I don't know if this is for every chapter, but it looks like the chapters are separated by like their own page. Like it's just a blank page that has like maybe a drawing and it says chapter 1 and then the chapter name, which we all know I love a good chapter name. So this chapter 1, the cyclone, and obviously it's an image of the house getting whisked away by a tornado. Dorothy's house specifically. So there are images, little drawings on the first page. So I'm going to put it up here so you can see it. It's obviously Dorothy looking out at the grassy plain. And there's another little drawing of Toto at the bottom. So Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small, for the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. There were 4 walls, a floor, and a roof, which made one room. And this room contained a rusty-looking cooking stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. And that's the first page. Just based on this first page with the drawings and the descriptions of everything, it is written very simplistically. So it's perfect for children to be able to comprehend and enjoy. But it's also just good, you know, your world building, and world building is fun and enjoyable at any age. So I don't feel like I had anything super poignant to say about this book. I think really my goal in making this particular video, and the reason why I chose this book, is because although through my channel and a lot of other areas I see on the internet specifically, books are being celebrated and promoted, libraries, bookstores, all avenues of literature and just reading are being celebrated and encouraged. There is, what I have seen in my experience, a growing movement, and who knows how big that movement is, for reading less and libraries not being important, and that reading is a useless hobby. It's something that I wanted to kind of make a point about in this video through talking about this book that was read to me when I was little. You know, this book is just nursery rhymes turned into a fun adventure fantasy story for children. But again, like I said, like I could so easily sit down and enjoy this book today as an adult. And I always want to take the time to point out how not just important reading is, but how fun it is. You know, I grew up not just reading books, right? Because obviously I've been a bookworm my whole life. I love reading books. It was heavily encouraged by my parents, and so they were also huge bookworms. But that's not all I grew up with. I obviously grew up playing video games, and you know, I grew up in the 2000s. Like, there was technology back then. The internet wasn't that big, but I did grow up with technology. So obviously I grew up playing video games and watching TV and movies and TV shows. And so it's not like my only hobby was or is reading. But I can tell you so much more about the emotional impact that I had from reading books back then than all of the other hobbies I had, like watching TV and playing video games. And don't get me wrong, there were important moments of those too that were fun for me and definitely stimulating. But reading books or having books read to me as I grew up, it brought a specific kind of joy. Because when you're reading or having a book read to you, you're literally not in your own head anymore. You know, like when you're watching a movie or a TV show, like you're pretty aware of yourself. Like, you know, you're sitting there watching something. You're watching a character do something, and you may be, you know, feeling what they're feeling, you know, and watching them and going through what they're going through with them. But there's something very different about reading, especially reading fiction, where you're actually mentally and emotionally transported to another world, where you're having this book read to you, or you're reading this book and you lift your head up from reading, or the person stops reading and you're like, where am I? Like, what's happening. And I think a really great example of this is actually from a movie. If you have seen The Princess Bride, you're going to know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen The Princess Bride, I'm going to describe it a little bit. The entire premise of The Princess Bride is that the movie, the plot, is actually a book that is being read to a little boy by his grandfather while the little boy is sick in bed. And the movie is so all-consuming that when we go back to the grandfather and the little boy, like, you know, being read to in bed, it's like jarring. You're like, oh wait, yeah, this was just the story that's being read to him. It's not what the movie is, but at the same time it feels really real, but it's not real. So it's like, okay, wow, this is so, I was so invested, and not just invested, I was there. I was literally there. And there's been people who have said this, and I can't remember exact quotes right now, but there have been people, authors specifically, that liken reading books to actually traveling. It's like the only method of actually being able to travel without physically going anywhere. And I think that's why reading books, and especially certain books, because you're not going to be into everything you read, but reading has always just been such a great way for me to sometimes escape. You know, sometimes you want to escape reality and get into a story that's so fun and cool. Or sometimes just go with the flow, see what the story is going to be, you know, and you're actually there. So, you know, sometimes I think that people who don't enjoy reading haven't felt that way. And I think that that's because they haven't found any books that have made them feel that way. And it's honestly kind of like therapy, where you just kind of have to keep trying the different ones on, where it's like, or like a pair of jeans, like you just kind of have to keep trying them on until you find the right one that fits. And that's what reading is. That's what therapy is, honestly, because you just keep trying on different therapists until you find someone whose personality matches yours. And it's the same thing with jeans, because sometimes they're going to be a little too tight around the waist, but they have the perfect length. It's kind of like that. And I hope in making this video that I can kind of make the point that reading is important. And even when I was a little kid, it was such a fun thing for me. I always looked forward to story time, especially when my teacher read this book to me. It was just such a fun adventure. And you know, I know that, like I said, people are typically not big readers or banning books because of certain ideologies. But I mean, take a look at this book. There's so many options out there, and just reading anything, just trying to read something, a children's book, something you hear a friend talk about, just try. If it's not for you, you can put it down. It's okay if you don't finish it. There's been books I haven't finished, but the point is to try. The point is to take in reading as you would any other media. Like if you turn on a movie and you don't like it, you just turn it off. That's it. Like you don't have to finish it, but you may find something that provides an experience for you that you just can't find anywhere else, and in a good way. So it's kind of what I hoped to make a point of with this video. I want to encourage people to read. Don't get me wrong, I love watching movies and TV shows, and I listen to podcasts constantly. I get my entertainment from many different forms of media. But reading is something that I don't want people to stop doing. It's just always worrisome for me when there's a movement against something that is honestly only good. So hopefully this finds the right people and you guys can just sit down and read a book today. Something you find online. Maybe you go to a library. Maybe you hear about a book from a friend, so you order it and it gets delivered to your house. I don't know. But just try. Just try picking up a book when you have some time. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. You just try another one. It's that simple. The one thing we should obviously definitely be doing is encouraging children to read and also reading books to them. It's an experience like no other, and I promise you it is something that children will take with them for the rest of their lives, even if they don't become big bookworms like me. Like, they still will enjoy it, and it's so good for their development. So that's really all for this week's video. Thank you guys so much for watching and for being here, and I hope you guys go read a book that you enjoy or try to find one that you might enjoy, and I will see you all in the next video.